Hello. I noticed I've been spending too much time checking and checking again if I'm not going to say something untrue in this video, since it's the last of the series. But I realize there's bound to be things I'll want to correct later. So please see if there's a newer one that says it has corrections for this series. This frees me for just putting this one out, because I've been anxious about doing this. There's a mistake in the previous one. It's James, not John, my therapist last year. In my notes, there's only initials, and I had been talking to another James, and I had been writing an email to someone named John. Just got confused. Sorry, James. One thing I forgot to say that James said is the idea that people's actions make sense once we find the right context. There's always very good reasons for doing what we're doing. We're never bad or lazy or dumb. No, there's reasons, and usually they're about surviving when we were little. That's similar to what Marshall Rosenberg said, that each of us all the time we're trying to contribute to life. One lesson I take from this is that each person who is interested in solving a problem we have in common has something important to contribute, even if I don't see what it is, even if they don't see what it is, because otherwise they wouldn't be interested in solving the problems if they thought there is nothing they can do. In part 3, I forgot to talk about ADD and ADHD and a misconception that I think is doing a lot of damage. Sorry, I understand now why they have a glass of water. Okay, I hope that's going to be better. A misconception that I think is doing a lot of damage, hurting a lot of children. I went to school in Iran and in France, where apparently children are immune to this, because it just doesn't exist here. If I had gone to school in the US and in the 90s and since, I would probably have been diagnosed with something like this, ADD or ADHD or ODD. See, my intention was so focused on staying safe that I didn't have enough left to think with a lot of the time. They call these labels, apparently without understanding that there are good reasons why a child's attention wouldn't be available for working on tasks at school. Most of the time, I think it's because the child's attention is focused on something much more important, like how to avoid getting killed by their dad at home, who might be alcoholic, or dying from the neglect when they were little children of an emotionally unavailable mom because she had whatever stuff in her childhood. The emotional mind has no sense of time, and I'll talk about this in a bit. So these fears from childhood keep feeling like they apply to the present, and they are still just as strong throughout the rest of life if left unhealed. If these children really didn't have enough attention, how come they have no problem excelling in video games for hours on end? That takes attention. The doctors and researchers and administrators coming up with these nonsensical illnesses that they then medicate children for, they would not stand 1 minute in a video game contest with these children. These people apparently don't realize that their own attention isn't available for similar reasons, either childhood trauma or just sometimes also not being in a line of work that's satisfying enough to keep their interest, just like the children at school. Which is why they come up with this ridiculous diagnosis that don't stand basic scrutiny as I see it. Or at least they're widely exaggerating how many people genuinely have difficulty focusing attention in any context versus the vast majority who are simply standing up for their freedom against being bullied by school or who are simply too alarmed by their home situation to be able to focus on school. And there's another explanation for not doing well at school, which is that when you force someone to do something, they naturally resist doing it. Because for human beings, freedom is so important. There's wars all over that, and Marshall Rosenberg points out, because people want to choose for themselves what to do with their own life. Nobody wants to be forced to do something we don't want to do. Okay, so that was for ADD, ADHD, etc. Now, 12, yeah, this is going to be a long one. Other things, in addition to no longer getting overwhelmed by that fear reaction so much that I can't come back, and enjoying all this clarity and feeling this relief that I'm feeling now compared to before. Yeah, it was much worse. I'm a bit nervous today because it's the last one and I'm still worried about making mistakes, but it'll pass. Compared to before, and being so much happier. So it's 16 things total that make me think I've healed at least part of the trauma that was causing my issues. I'm listing these things because I want to be confident that what I say helps, really does help, because I want to contribute to everyone having effective knowledge about how to heal and prevent childhood trauma so we can get to a better world. So here are the 12 things I haven't talked about yet. The first one, I'm less worried about saving every last possible cent when shopping. It takes me less time to hesitate on whether to buy something or not. Second one, I'm much less afraid to ask people for what I want, like what to talk about, whether in conversations with friends or my family. Third one, I'm starting to relax. I'm less scared of spelling things incorrectly in posts or comments or emails. I still look up the spelling, but it's no longer the end of the world if I make a typo. I can let it stand and not go back and correct it. It was the end of the world before, when the small fear of making a mistake evoked the overwhelming fear of dying from being beaten or kicked out of the house or abandoned. Again, I'll talk a bit later about how the emotional brain doesn't have a notion of time like the intellectual brain. I'm much more comfortable asking for information in shops or on the phone or when buying things secondhand. Whereas in the past, I was afraid if I asked too many questions, enough to be satisfied that I had gotten the information I need, I would be disrespectful and I would be wasting people's time. Again, the real source of the fear, unconsciously, was getting killed. I wasn't showing this fear though, well, at least not that I was aware of. Maybe some people saw it. The people I was talking with probably thought I was very confident because I would play that role. Now I think I would see it myself. The fifth one. I have been able to do things I found too difficult until last year, such as solve problems in the software development work I do that I had been putting off dealing with, replying to work emails that had been piling up, fixing things around the house that I had left alone for years because I didn't see how to go about it. Like in the fireplace, the insulation plates were cracked and it was just falling into pieces, and I couldn't figure out how I would put the new ones in if I spent the money to buy them, because you need to first slide the one that's on the top, and then there's a slanted one, and then I just couldn't figure it out. Last month, almost last month, 3 weeks ago, I went and bought a large board of this stuff for much less than getting replacements from the manufacturer, and with just a pencil line and then eyeballing with a grinder, I cut and shaped the pieces that I needed, and it took just a few tries to figure out how to work them in. It's much simpler than I thought before. I was just much too afraid of making a mistake and ruining everything in previous years. I couldn't have done that. Or if I could have, then it would have taken me so long, it would have been a major project. The sixth, I could no longer, before I could no longer even focus enough to do simple things like cleaning the windows. I spent a few hours an afternoon last year just trying to clean the glass on a double door here, and it would still look terrible, with streaks all over. Now cleaning the same one takes me less than 10 minutes. The seventh observation that makes me think I've made progress in healing. I've bought and sold a few second-hand items, and I was much more comfortable because it was clearer to me what I wanted and what I was willing to give in order to get it. And I approached the transaction as a joint effort to find a deal we're both satisfied with, instead of a battle where I had to say just the right things, or I was going to lose something or be taken advantage of. As a parenthesis, for those who know Molyneux, I get the impression when he talks with someone, he thinks of it as this kind of battle. So it makes sense that he's so aggressive, because I think he's scared, and he's trying to go for the kill before his enemy does it to him. Eighth thing, I no longer wipe my phone with alcohol when coming back from the shops. I no longer wash the floor after people have walked in with shoes. I haven't wiped the doorknobs with alcohol in months. I'm no longer uncomfortable sitting on the couch after my son or his girlfriend have been sitting there with their school clothes. I can even come back from the store and type on the computer without washing my hands. That was just inconceivable in previous years. It's not completely over, but I'm almost there. Ninth, there's this weird swelling I've had in my fingers this winter and the past 5 ones. When it's cold, my fingers have been swelling so much that I can't bend them like this anymore. And I don't know if you can see, there's still a bit of weird color remaining. It's not completely the same color it should be. And it used to swell so much for months that I couldn't bend them anymore, and the skin would crack and then it would bleed. Luckily, I found quickly that if I take around 20 milligrams of vitamin C every couple of hours, it doesn't get to where it bleeds. But I went to see 3 physicians, a dermatologist and an internist, and none of them could figure what it was and how to fix it. It's not an allergy, it's not Lyme disease from a tick bite. I checked all the infectious diseases I could find described on the internet, no match. They said it could be an autoimmune disease, and that's what it looks like. I suspected something in the food I'm eating, or a mineral or a vitamin deficiency, because the first winter I had just stopped eating sugar and switched to eating more fat. I kept a food log when I did that, so I eliminated all the new foods to see if it made a difference. No. So this winter I even started eating bread again, and even a few cookies. No change. And it's been keeping me from doing pull-ups, from opening jars, from handling tools. It's been a problem. And I noticed that it was starting on my toes too, which made them hurt when I was running barefoot. And then my nose started to bleed when it was cold. On previous videos you can see the tip of my nose is kind of purple, and yeah, that's what it was. Then Eric, my running buddy, hi Eric, who's a youth educator and he's into psychoanalysis, suggested that it could be psychosomatic. I had looked into that, but I looked again, wondering, what is this achieving for me? Is there a benefit I'm not seeing? And my unconscious mind is trying to get me to notice something important. I didn't find anything. Then a couple weeks ago, I listened again to Stephen Porges' interview, and this time, now that I'm clearer, I heard him say that the vagus nerve is also responsible for regulating blood circulation. So anxiety that way can have an effect on what's happening in the capillaries in my fingers, toes, nose, etc. So it looks like that's it. Well, it's warmer now, but I'm much less anxious. And I had been, I was focused on food since it was right after I changed the way I had been eating forever. And I hadn't realized that it was the preceding summer that I had been depressed after I lost hope that I could keep my children out of school. That's what had been causing this blood circulation problem, the anxiety that jumped up after that. Since I had this drop in anxiety that I described in part 1, 3 weeks ago now, my fingers have been healing. It's also been a bit warmer, so I'm not sure, but I think I know what to do now to no longer be bothered by this constriction that had been killing blood cells in the cells, not just the blood, that had been killing the cells in the coldest parts of my body. So anxiety caused by childhood trauma can have this kind of physical effect too, by dysregulating core body functions. And then people get all sorts of illnesses, possibly, cancer. Lots of them could be this, and so many other problems like myopathy or chronic fatigue. I mean, many. All those autoimmune diseases, maybe. And many doctors are not aware of this, and they're not able to help. Again, I think it's not their fault that they're not aware of this sort of thing. I think everybody is very smart and has a lot of intuition and creativity, but it's the confusion from fear, mostly from childhood trauma, having been powerless, that blinds us, that holds people back, even doctors. 10th, listening again to Nathaniel Brandon's Honoring the Self while doing the dishes last 10 days ago. I appreciate the clarity I have. Last year, listening to this audiobook, I was intimidated, thinking, wow, I don't understand all this, which seems so clear to him. I worried it will take me decades to understand it like he does. Now, with the clarity from no longer having a large part of my attention focused on hypervigilance, when I hear him explain what he calls self-esteem anxiety, which others call pathological anxiety or neurotic anxiety, it's clear to me that he's close to the solution, but he just passes it by. Here's an excerpt. In the case of self-esteem anxiety, the thing of value being threatened ultimately is the sufferer's ego. Sorry, I need some water again. By ego, to repeat, I mean the unifying center of awareness, the center of consciousness, the ultimate sense of I, that which perceives reality. Oh, I don't need to read that. This anxiety is a powerful force in the lives of countless millions of human beings. We cannot understand their behavior if we cannot understand how much of their energy they use to defend against a dread they do not understand. They are the ones who cannot bear to be alone, who cannot live without sleeping pills. Yeah, there's a moped or something. Like me, these people. Who jump at every unexpected sound. Hello. Who drink too much to calm a nervousness that comes too often. Who constantly feel a pressing need to be amusing and to entertain. who flee to too many movies they have no desire to see and to too many gatherings they have no desire to attend, who sacrifice any vestige of independent self-confidence to an excessive concern with what others think of them, who long to be emotional dependents or to be depended upon, who succumb to periodic spells of unaccountable depression, who submerge their existence in the dreary passivity of unchosen routines and unchallenged duties, and as they watch their years slip by, wonder in occasional spurts of frustrated anguish what has robbed them of their chance to live, who run from one meaningless sexual affair to another, who seek membership in the kind of collective movements that dissolve personal identity. I'm still bothered by this. And obviate personal responsibility. Such anxiety is a response to an unconsciously perceived threat to self-esteem, to the sense of control, efficacy, and worth. The fear seems to be metaphysical, directed at the universe at large, at existence as such. Ah, he's so close, I wish he would have seen it. It makes much more sense to me to think this fear is about survival from when we were very young, like I've been explaining about my fears. I'll talk about another thing I think he also missed by just a little in a few minutes, because I want everybody to benefit from all the pioneering work he did, rather than miss out because he didn't get it exactly right. 11th. I no longer get angry when talking with my mother, and I also no longer hide my opinions like I used to. That's a big change and a big relief for me. By the way, there's more I'm grateful for from my mom. She couldn't soothe me enough, but she did arrange for me to have lots of playtime, and she did support me in learning to take reasonable risks, enjoy myself, have fun, be positive, optimistic. Allan Schore explains this is important too, in addition to learning to soothe oneself. And I had that side of things taken care of since the beginning, thanks to my mom. Also, she had the clarity to take us out of Iran when the violence started to menace us, and the courage to leave my dad behind in order to save us. He said she was worrying too much, it would be fine. He wanted to wait to sell everything so we would have money where we went next. I think he was also scared of not earning enough to be safe, starting over elsewhere. So we had a difficult few years there, with very little money and my mother depressed. Then when I turned 18, she sold the violin she had kept since her childhood, the only valuable she had, to pay a lot of money for me to spend a year in the US as an exchange student. This is what allowed me to learn to speak English for real, not just the English they teach in school, at least in France. And because I was lucky that the family who took me in, hi Fred, Lee, Mike, thanks for welcoming me in your home. Because they lived right in the middle of Silicon Valley, just a few miles from Apple, I could get a more complete picture of the computer industry than I had from just living in Paris. And this was a fantastic asset that made it much easier to establish myself professionally in that world. And it also gave me access to lots of books that weren't available in French, or in France for that matter, cost a fortune, and they were difficult to find. You had to order them from the United States, about psychology and brain science. And that opened the way for me to do what I like to do today. So thank you, Mom. 12th, finally, I mostly no longer lose track of my feelings during conversation. That's what I wanted so much. This fear reaction has happened only rarely in a conversation for a few months now, and when it did, I noticed it within a few seconds, and then I was able to relax quickly. Or sometimes it takes me a few minutes, as you see in this video. But that's talking in front of you all on the internet. The definitive test to find out if I can stay calm now would be to talk to my friend and future life partner if she wants to. I'm confident I'll stay myself no matter what now, or that I'll be able to come back quickly enough. I hope she calls soon, and in addition to everything else, I'll get a chance to confirm this with her. Basically, now that I don't have this constant anxiety, the repressed fear, keeping a lot of my attention on staying safe by avoiding making mistakes, this attention is available, except when there are noises like this moped who's been in the same part of the street for 5 minutes? What's he doing? That still gets to me. So now that I don't have this constant anxiety, the repressed fear, keeping a lot of my attention on staying safe by avoiding making mistakes, this attention is available for achieving what I'm trying to do, and it gives me much more clarity. Everything looks much clearer, much less complicated to figure out. It's like I had almost permanent tunnel vision, and now I'm more relaxed and I can be aware of more of what's going on, both inside and around me. So that's what I take as my evidence that my childhood trauma is in large part healed. If you see something I'm missing, please let me know. Okay, let me check how long it's been, because I'm thinking maybe this is going to be too long. Half an hour. Well, I don't know, I'll see you later. Probably still breaking into 2. Okay, so now for the same reason, building knowledge about what is more effective and what isn't so effective, again, so we can get to a better world before violence possibly kills all of us. Here are some of the things that didn't help me enough. And I'm hoping to show, now that I'm convinced I know the cause of my problems, why there was little chance this could help. So you don't waste too much time when you want to try them yourself. I had almost unbearable anxiety and shame. I was lonely and depressed, and with so much confusion, I doubted whether I was thinking straight. So I tried these things out of desperation, in case my reasoning was so impaired that I was mistaken, thinking they're not going to help. So I tried affirmations for maybe a month. The first 2 days, every waking moment, I repeated either out loud or in my head, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. I did it looking into my eyes in the mirror and trying to really mean it, as if I was saying it to someone I love. For a few days it gave me hope to have something to try that was simple and might work. But gradually I gave up. After a few weeks, when I realized that I still felt just as depressed, hopeless, anxious, ashamed. Looking back, knowing what the problems were that I was dealing with, I see no way anything short of addressing the roots of these problems could have worked. But maybe if I had done affirmations that were easier for me to believe in, like, I'm not all bad, so there's a little hope, maybe that could have helped more. I didn't think of it. I hesitated for weeks whether to go to the county psychiatry center or not, because I was afraid they would forcibly medicate me if I revealed the self-harm thoughts I had. When I finally went, all I got was an appointment to come back 2 months later. I was disgusted being turned away like this. So it turns out I managed not to harm myself, but no thanks to them. And when I did go, after waiting those 2 months, and I was still in just as bad a shape, their psychiatrist was just as unconcerned. Told me, yeah, that's life, it's tough sometimes, try a spiritual practice or try traveling. And she only stayed 20 minutes because she had a meeting. She said I should talk to one of their psychologists because they're young and pretty, and maybe that will lift my spirits. I said I doubt it, and I have scruples about using up time and money that might help someone else. She said, we spend it anyway, don't worry. My grandparents' flat, sitting on the border between Paris and Levallois, we were on the 13th floor, where I lived 19 years, was right next to a county sports complex. I saw that thing get renovated every 3 or 4 years. So I know that when a public building looks all shiny and new with every expensive everything, it's likely there's a corruption in the air and someone is pocketing a lot of public money. This place had that look. I was disgusted to be associated with any of this. At the same time, I wasn't sure the psychologist was going to be as useless to me as I expected. So because I was desperate, I agreed to an appointment. I was surprised that I got it for just next week. When I saw her, it was someone fresh out of school with close to zero useful knowledge. Not her fault. I suppose she went to school thinking they'd give her a valuable training, and probably she also thinks that's what she got. She seemed very uncomfortable and trying to hide it behind an air of professionalism. She was offended when I asked if she's happy herself. I said, you don't look happy to me, so I wonder why I should spend my time talking to you. She said, oh, you can't ask that. This is not about me. She said I have to trust her or she can't do anything for me. I said, trust is earned. I don't trust you just because you're sitting in this office. So we weren't off to a good start. Instead of taking it personally, a more competent person would have figured out that I was angry about something and it was getting expressed this way towards her, and she would have maybe asked me if I'm aware of being angry and what is the deeper source of this anger. And that would have been helpful. But I doubt she's ever going to learn this because the environment she works in is so isolated from feedback that could bring improvement. Since she doesn't decide anything, it's all orders from above. People who don't see what is actually going on. Plus, she gets paid no matter what. And it is set up so she has too many people to see to be able to notice that her tools are not effective. So she could maybe look for better ones. Just like government school or bureaucracy in general. It's just inefficient. I suspect in just a few years, she'll be just as jaded as her boss, the psychiatrist. Meanwhile, the waiting room is full of people in obvious distress, but the only people allowed to help them are those who go through the mindless training she went through, and then the work in that hopelessly dysfunctional system, Like Molyneux's wife, too. I think she's also a product of the same system in a different country. And I agree, that democracy is an improvement over chaos and having even more violence, but I really want to move to something better now. Also, I'm not saying this just to bash the people who participate in this system. I agree that right now it's difficult to do anything if you don't accept to take part in it. What I want, like everybody else I think, is for people who are in pain to be able to receive the relief they need. And right now, even though this arrangement we have does a little of this, it's also failing to bring this relief to most people who need it, and it's also creating more pain and more poverty and more pollution on this planet. So I want us to see this and figure out something that works better. The other psychologists and psychiatrists in the area I didn't bother with. In 2010, after my ex-wife left and Child Protective Services required me to get a psychiatric evaluation, I went to two of the supposed best ones. Respected gentlemen with a private practice. Even though I had all this childhood trauma, they both said I was okay. Oh, and one of them was sleeping with his patients, married women who came and probably still do for specifically this purpose, from what I saw. Very healthy for a psychiatrist. At the time, I also checked 4 or 5 others in the area, not just these two, and it wasn't any better. If you're in a major city, you might have more luck if you look well enough. I went to a psychoanalyst. I don't remember which school, Freudian or Jungian or something else, from the local psychoanalytic society, since I hadn't tried that yet. The woman who listened to my story looked so scared, and that she was trying to hide it and cover it up with fake concern for me, that I just had no hope spending any more time with her would get me anywhere. Just like the other one, she gave me the impression she was in worse shape than even me and not aware of it. Basically, everyone I saw seemed to be in worse shape than me, and they weren't aware of it. During almost all my life before, I wasn't aware either that I had these problems. So again, this is not for bashing them. I think it's just a reality that most people are suffering from some variant of this, and they're not aware of it. Most people, including the top professionals in psychology and psychiatry. When you see Dr. Drew, you'd expect him to realize this about himself. But in the archives I'm listening to, and he was just as respected back then. And I've heard his recent podcast, and it doesn't seem to have changed. I'm not sure, but at least at the time, he still believed that there's these countries and you need a military because there's bad guys over there and they're crazy and they're dead set on attacking you. Bessel van der Kolk seems to... Sorry, that's a quad. Bessel van der Kolk seems to suffer from the same blindness when it comes to the military, because he explains in a presentation I saw about his book on trauma, and I appreciate all the work that he's doing. I'm just saying that he would be happier if he looked into that and be able to do what he wants to do, help other people better, I'm convinced. I agree it makes sense to protect ourselves from people who might harm us, but this is more than just that. I see this goes beyond reasonable self-defense to have such a negative view of people. And I think it's only possible to think that others are bad if I think that I am bad. And that's a symptom of childhood trauma, to see myself as bad, I'm convinced. I suppose Dr. Drew is aware of Alice Miller's explanation for why people are blind to the violence they were subjected to in childhood. But it's difficult to realize you're doing it yourself when everybody around you thinks the same way or is even more afraid. So, I'm saying this, for that reason, so that these people whom I admire, I hope they'll be open to exploring that they maybe have stuff they can heal, and then they'll feel so much better and happier, and everybody around them maybe can benefit from that as well. Okay, I criticized school a few minutes ago, but there's worse. I was worried sending my children to school would damage their mind. They'd get brainwashed. They'd be zombified. I didn't realize that the alternative I wanted, keeping them at home with me, wasn't much better, because my almost constant fear, even though I wasn't aware of being afraid, they picked it up. They sensed that I was behaving as if there was danger menacing us everywhere, and this made them anxious too, and this interfered with their development probably more than anything at school, because the environment at home where children interact with the most influential people in their life, their parents, has a stronger effect on them. I'm saying this for the other parents who see value in unschooling. I think unschooling is great. I would do it again. All I'm saying is we need to look into our own trauma first to really protect our children. Okay, so the other things I tried that didn't help me enough. I listened again to Buddhist monks explaining meditation. You know what? I'm almost halfway. I'm going to continue a little more, and then I'll break this into two because I worry it's not going to. It's going to take forever to upload, etc. I tried this meditation, even though I was already familiar with the relaxation technique where you start with your toes or fingers and you go all over your body while keeping your attention on each part until you can feel warmth there. That was useful to me when I was still in high school. It felt good to relax, but the anxiety came back even while I was doing this. I listened to 2 hours of the most popular motivational speeches online. It didn't help. Tapping EMDR didn't help when I just tried by myself. Maybe these would have helped if I had done them with an experienced practitioner, but I just don't see how this thing could have helped looking back and seeing what it was that needed to be changed. The human contact with the practitioner, I see how this can help, and maybe getting both sides of the brain into a common pattern can help, but I don't see how it can be enough. I tried that. I tried moving my eyes and my attention from one side and then another for a few minutes while running in the countryside here a couple times. It didn't bring me more relief than just running without doing that. Oh, and in part 4, I didn't say enough how much running did help. It brought relief every time, even if I only ran 15-20 minutes. Just getting the body moving long enough would bring me relief for a few hours. I listened to talks by Jack Kornfield, Eckhart Tolle, Ram Dass, Pema Chodron, and Byron Katie, and a few others I forgot the name of. And some of the things they said sort of connected, but I heard too much that didn't, so that wasn't helpful to me. Gabor Mate's talks I found much more insightful and interesting, but again, I didn't find how to apply any of the interesting things he talks about. I listened to Pete Gerlach's videos, the same. A lot of what he says makes sense to me. I can see there's useful nuggets of wisdom there, but overall I found it too haphazard to help me with my problems. Okay, I'm going to stop here and just continue in like 5 minutes with the rest, because it's about halfway. See you just now.